Well, good afternoon. This is something that the Diversity Council has done on a quarterly basis. This is actually our fourth learning session and our fourth ability to bring together some esteemed panel to make us aware of the diversity in this Lake Norman area, as well as diversity in this country. And I always think that it's such a good thing that we have so many people that were willing to come here with the kind of pay we give them. So everyone here is volunteering their time and their energy and their thoughts and their perspectives, and we really appreciate that. The Diversity Council and Lake Norman Chamber is really excited about that. We're also excited about the fact that we have a sponsor that sponsored our food and it also has some extra stuff for us as we leave the room. You'll find in some bags and stuff. But Jonathan, why don't you come up from the Fifth Third Bank and tell us a little bit about why are you sponsoring this thing?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm Bill in the Lake Norman Chamber. It's an honor to be here. So Fifth Third Bank obviously is Cincinnati based, but we're growing like crazy. So we're building left and right in North Carolina. We've got some in South Carolina. We're huge on diversity, big advocates of diversity, making sure our customers and employees both all feel understood, valued, and of course heard. So we like to give out to the community, and always reach out and help out any way we can for all our small business owners and our consumers. Financial literacy is a big thing I'd like to teach as well. So, as a personal banker, we do like to reach out and just teach people that didn't get that opportunity. So. And outside, I did bring a bunch of goodie bags that you guys are more than welcome to take home with you. Learn about Fifth Third. We have some great rates, not only for just business owners, but also the consumer side. So we show love to both sides. But yeah, it's an honor to be here. And thank you so much for having us.
All right, good. All right, let's get Jonathan. Okay. I wish we had time to talk about his background because he's been around to some of the. You might have seen him as a bartender at some local.
At a few breweries.
Yeah. So yeah, that's yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna let our panel introduce themselves because if I take the time to introduce you, it'll be all day long. It'll be most of our hour here. So I want you to introduce yourselves. And I just want to say, just let me just say that Doug Kropelnicki. Okay, he's going to talk a little bit about his experience as an Asian American, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have Vinay Patel, who is an esteemed. We were just talking a little bit, and I was thinking to myself, how do I get a free room? British Virgin Islands. How do I do that? I want. We got to talk after this is over. And then I have John Chen, who is extraordinary. No, you just know mystery of all the Lake Norman area. People know you. They see you around. You've been doing so much work in the community. So we're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Let me just say this. Let me. And again, I asked the panel to really introduce themselves, but let me just say something here. This is an example of a workshop, example of a educational program that's designed, I'll be honest with you, designed to stretch you. So we may say some things here today that you may not understand or you may not agree with. That's okay. Because to me, when we learn stuff, that's when we grow. And I always tell people we have a choice. We could either have a growth mindset or we could have a fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset is the person that knows it all. You don't need to tell me nothing because I got it all down pat. I know what I'm talking about. My perspective is right. That's the fixed mindset. A growth mindset is someone that says, I'm really curious about what you just said. Tell me more. Because they recognize that the more knowledge I have, the more I grow. So today, what we want to do is present a program to you that's both growth-oriented, awareness, knowledge-based, and might I say scientifically based. This is not just something we're taking out of our heads, but this is something we've studied and looked at from a lot of different angles. So we have a program for you that might stretch you. And I'm hoping by the end of the day that you find out that, yeah, that was some interesting learning, and I'm going to go home and I'll think about it and be curious about it, and that I will grow as a result of it. So if I have to, Laura, if you had a choice, on one table you have growth and knowledge, and in the other table you have $1 million, I know which one you would take. Right? So we got that. Now, let me just say this. Folks on this panel are representing some groups, but they're not the group. Does that make sense? They represent their individual experience, but they're not representing, not here to foster stereotypes. They're not here to have on their shoulder all of what they know about Asians, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. That's not their role here. Their role here is to give their perspective, their individual perspective. I just wanted to lay that out too. Because one of the things that we found out, the US Census, for example, talks about the Asian, and just the Asians and Native Hawaiian experiences. And they show that all of those islands, Pacific Islands, encompass somewhere potentially more than 50 ethnic groups, just in that area there, as well as 15 countries and tens of thousands, check this out, tens and thousands of islands that represent the Asian, specific, and Native Hawaiian ethnic group. So we're talking about a lot of stuff. We have a tendency, I think, in this country to want to put people into groups. And so we think about, I'm an African-American, for example. You may have noticed that an African-American essentially is not one culture, it's multicultural. You know, when John talks, do you know how many different cultures he's going to be speaking to, but at the same time recognizing that the thing that happens a lot in this country is that we have a tendency to put people in boxes, therefore we stereotype them, therefore we also foment prejudice, and then therefore discrimination. What we don't want to do is foment stereotypes, discrimination, and prejudice here today. But we do want to acknowledge the individual experiences of people here today. Does that make sense, y'all? Mm-hmm. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to our panel. I had 2 questions for you, and you can answer these questions any way you want. Sure. But the one question is, as you have become successful in your own right, and they are very, very successful, by the way, y'all. What are some of the experiences of stereotypes that you might have faced as you were coming up? That's one question. The other question is, I hear a lot about what some people refer to as the minority model, the model minority myth. Could you speak to that a little bit? The model minority myth and what that means to you. And I'm going to let John go first and just take that, if that's okay. Take those 2 questions, but introduce yourself, if that's all right too, however you want to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, I just put this question out of the way. Where's the best Chinese restaurant in this area?
Bao Bao Chinese restaurant right next to A1 Vacuum Solution.
All right. Listen, that's exactly the one I would recommend. Okay, now you want to take over? Just kidding. My name is John Chen. I've been with Carolina Asian American Chamber of Commerce for a good number of years since I retired in 2003. I used to work for a company which no longer has any footprint here. It's called SREE. And Lake Norman is probably almost like my second home. I used to come here twice a week. And we have a Dragon Boat Club here. And we practice out of Port City Club. And of course, the Dragon Boat Festival every year at Ramsey Creek Park. And I don't know what to say to thank you for many people here. Sally, Mr. Lake Norman, Bill, still trying to find a parking place for us. There are just so many of them. And I'm we are very, very grateful. Do you want me to start talking about the Asian, the myth of Asian model
What is it? Yeah,
community?
I mean, tell us a little bit about the dragon boat stuff. What is that?
Okay, I thought I was gonna hold back because I have never imagined the impact of Dragon Boat event, which I know is a great event, I know that, okay, but it actually impacts the psychological needs of the entire Asian community. And it's just, to us, it's just unbelievable. Maybe there's a side benefit, but it overwhelms everything we do. The Dragon Boat is a community building event that we proposed to the Crossroads Charter Project back in 2005. Tremendous community support, except money. Okay, but we said, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And we started out in 2006, right here. And with a lot of help from Travis and other people and Davidson College. We started out with a fairly modest kind of a scale. There's only about a couple of hundred dragon boaters. The dragon boat is a long canoe. And just tell you how little people are aware of that sport or the event, which is 2,300 years tradition from China. It's held in May, it's called Double Fit, or they call it the Dumpling Festival. Okay, that's a different name. They wrap in leaves, you know that, right? The rice wrapped in leaves. When you go to dim sum, you have that. That's one of the events in there. 3 events China, most important. The New Year, Double Fit, and the Mid-Autumn Festival. But anyway, so the event was okay, but we are not quite sure, whether or not we could really sustain that. And by hooks and by crooks, we beginning to get people to participate. To make a long story short, so we have one of the Asian Chamber board member. Dave, how are you? All the way from Huntersville. And it blossomed a couple of hundred voters all the way to over 1,000. Okay, before the pandemic, we got 52 teams from Canada, from Baltimore, from Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, plus our local teams, including the firemen and the CMPD. So it's pretty broad, and we're delighted that it's successful, and thank you so much for all your help. So now let me talk a little bit about, you want to talk about the model community,
Yes.
Asian community. The word came from, I think, in the 60s. They call Asian, being a model community. Basically, because they don't know much about Asian community, people are quiet there, very reserved. They tend to be more self-supporting, and without, they don't have a lot of church group they belong to, so they're not, really very social minded and law-abiding, patriotic. So that's that part of immigration people, that generation during that period. But if you look at earlier, different laborers coming here, and build a railroad and all those stuff, but then into the Exclusion Act, it's a lot of ups and downs. But that period happened to be right after China became communist China. A lot of scholars, graduates, college graduates came to this country. So all of them go to school and, book smart and doing a lot of the right things. So people don't know about them. So that's a trend. Actually, it's really a myth. I can tell you a lot more about, why it's a myth and what is the potential impact of the Dragon Boat event actually brought to life and to impact the well-being of the Asian community in Charlotte area and in this region. So
That's so cool. Thank you for that. Because one thing we do know is the myth that a lot of folks in Asian communities are hardworking, they're good at math, they're real good at music, that they, like you said,
they are book smart, but they're not really street smart.
Yeah, and that's
Okay,
all of
they
these,
don't have the right soft skills to deal with people, many of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
and that's the myth.
Vinay, you're laughing.
Yeah, that's the myth. That's it. Why don't we go ahead and turn to you, Vinay, and just
Yeah.
tell us a little about you.
Actually, I check off a couple of those boxes. My family heritage is Indian. I was born and raised in the Fiji Islands. And my grandparents actually migrated to Fiji from India in the 1940s during the time when Queen Victoria was taking this so-called and the laborers out there. Basically, it was a form of slavery, going down there to work. So you had the group from India kind of go all over the world, if you would, wherever England had colonized, they went. So long story short, I moved here in 1985. My uncle, who founded our company, moved here much sooner than that. And you were talking about hardships and things that you feel from a prejudice perspective. I mean, today, the Indian Americans own the majority of the hotels in the country. Back in the early 80s, he bought his first hotel in 1980. A bank would not give him a loan. He bought it at 19% owner financed interest. And what that proceeded to, and you probably saw, I mean, when I first moved here in 1985, you saw it. You saw billboards going up that said American owned, and it was just a plug against other folks that were in the business. That's when an organization was formed with the help of a couple of franchise companies called the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. And their goal at first was just to get rid of those stereotypes, get rid of, just because you were an Indian American, you weren't able to do it. And that was mid 80s is when that happened. Today, there are almost 35,000 members in that organization. And the members of that organization control far north of half of the hotels. You're talking about how much we get paid. I mean, technically these days, I'm a professional volunteer board member. I do a lot of community work. And it's just because we've been given the privilege over the years to be successful in not just in this region, but across the country. So I take it upon myself to take that opportunity to give back, put yourself out there. My wife says this all the time, right? She considers herself a community connector. It's not your job to come know me. It's my job to put it out there and let you know who I am. And I think that's the mentality we need to have on a daily basis if we're ever going to get past the stigma and whatever perceptions people will have of us. And I'm seeing it firsthand right now. I got appointed to the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees. Talk about getting put into the fire over there, right? It's crazy because you're seeing all aspects of life, and you go on a university campus and you see everything at different stages of things. So I think this is great. I mean, we have to talk about it. To me, minority, I define it much broader than most people define it. To me, minority is anybody that does not have the means, if you will. Okay, it's not just your skin color, your nationality, or whatever it is. Somebody that's in rural Eastern North Carolina could technically be considered a minority because they don't have the wherewithal that somebody else may have. May not have the opportunity that somebody else may have. So I like taking a broader look at it at the end of the day. But, prejudices are there, right? After 9/11, Indians were targeted. The Sikh American community was targeted because they wore turbans. During COVID, right? The Asian American community was targeted, and you saw it firsthand. And it's just, plain old stupidity, for lack of a better word. It's ignorance. And so how do you change that? Do you expect somebody to come know you, or do you put yourself out there? So that's what I try to do. I'm not shy about it, and actually enjoy it.
Yeah. Are people receptive to when you put yourself out there, pretty much?
I think so. They've asked me to be a part of a lot of different things, so
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that they are. And again, I think there's a hunger for knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, at the end of the day, and it's a matter of how you're presenting it, right? I mean, you could be confrontational about it, that gets you nowhere at the end of the day. There's always a way around things, and you know, if you're able to stand your ground civilly, then there shouldn't be a reason.
Yeah, yeah,
The key is that word civility.
Yes.
You know, we forget that
Yeah.
a lot in this
Yeah.
country.
And also another word that I've learned too is common ground.
Mhm.
How do you project the common ground into getting to know people, people getting to know you?
You know, it goes back to personal experiences, you know, talking about something that is of interest to the other side. It's not always about you at the end of the day, right? If I'm gonna sit here and be poor me all the time, it's not gonna go anywhere. You know, what is it that you and I can focus on together rather than me having to focus on you and you having to focus on me? And that works.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll tell you, I mean, when I was asked if I'd be interested to be on the board at UNC, it was for a reason. The Asian American population on that campus is ballooning. And they had no representation globally, not on the Chapel Hill's board or on the Board of Governors. You know, that's when, you know, I was asked if I would do it, and I think that's a good thing. Right? I mean, you're diversifying representation at the board level too, which is important. So, and I think people are seeing that. As for myth, and I think it's very similar, John. I mean, you know, the Chinese population left China after that. I think a lot, I mean, India had a brain drain because there was no opportunities over there. I mean, recently you've got opportunities, but you know, there was a lack of CEO material in India because they all came here. My uncle came here. You know, my father-in-law came here. They all came here, got their advanced degrees and made something for themselves here. You know, yeah, all those other things fall into place, but it was just the reasoning for folks to come here because, you know, this was the great big hope. Right? This was a country of opportunity where there wasn't any in China, there wasn't any in India, there wasn't any in much places. So,
Well, the point you're making about the brain drain, largely they're in the 60s and early 70s. And then the recession came, some of the people went back. And that's why I developed the 5 dragons in Asia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and so on and so forth. But the point that I think is also important is that how do you find a common ground, right? I think it takes both sides, okay, to find a common ground. And I think in part, the Asian community has not been equipped only to reach out. That's what I say, you reach out. And I think part of our mission is trying to cultivate, to work with them, to build this confidence so that they could be more engaged, more connected, and far beyond just the Chinese and Indian community. Those are the 2 largest populations in the United States. But there are about 23 million Asians in this country. Okay, the top 6, I don't need to show my finger. You could probably see, you know, Japan, India, China, Korea, Filipino, and that's probably full of the time Vietnamese. But you got about 3.5 million or more recent arrivals. Those are not brain drains, okay? Those are, I guess we invited them through the graciousness of United Nations, okay, as immigrants, as refugees. Back then, you know, we just come here, we're not refugees. So those people really need a lot of help. And they are kind of being handicapped. You said minority, they were a minority. And that's the one that we have a lot of challenge, trying to connect them together with the rest of us. And together, hopefully, you know, we'll be able to support each other, also to express, you know, our wish or our desire to reach out to the community and work with the community together, because they're looking for one thing. They feel that they ought to feel they belong here. That's really the biggest challenge. And there are ways that, you know, I think we are making progress. And Dragon Boat is, is in a way is a godsend because we have program there, we invite them to join. So much so to a point that we feel comfortable. They say, hey, look, guys, we're gonna hold an exhibit of Asian community together, okay? The title of the exhibit is called A Journey of Hope. And it just started out it just opened at the Charlotte Museum of History. 21 of Asian communities, out of 24, they're all there, donating the stuff, participating. And it's really gratifying. I think that's the first step that to bring them out, to make them feel that they are liked. We appreciated that. And also we respect them. So I think those are the steps that hopefully, the Dragon Boat is kind of really a side benefit, becomes a major kind of a contributor to this activity.
And Doug, I'm gonna get you here in a second. Just one question, follow-up question on. This is a kind of a hard question, but we hear a lot about you want to have a festival and you want to acknowledge who you are and all of that. But this is America. Why don't you just want to be Americans? Why do you have to have a boat festival?
Well, we're doing both. Okay, we are Americans, foremost. And then, you have heritage, your tradition that you value. I don't like the word melting pot. You don't melt, okay? You be part of it, okay? Melting, that means everybody's homogenized. I mean, that's terrible. There's no longer bao, no good restaurant anymore. Okay? Everything that's what they call Asian, they call Asian fusion, but they don't call it fusion, okay? So there's a big distinction there. So I think we need to have both.
100% agree, 100% agree. And you've seen, John and them, they do that. My wife was there the other night at the museum.
Well, how come you weren't there? No, just kidding.
I was actually out of town, I think. No, but I mean, it's a cultural exchange at that point in time, right? And that's what those purposes are. I mean, you do that. They do India Festival down in Charlotte. It's about, again, giving people a platform to get to know each other, get to know who we are, get to know who you are, right? And you could, and so people who take a look at it, that's in my mind, it's just a bad lens to look at.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're all Americans first and foremost. Right? You're here because you believe that, but that doesn't mean your heritage is gone.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what you're doing is uplifting your heritage, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Giving the space where we can learn about each other. Yeah, and that's where I think, we're talking about that community that just come here.
Yeah.
Events like those help them assimilate a lot better. Sure. At the end of the day.
Doug, what about you? You want to introduce yourselves? Because you have a real unique background, and we want to hear about that.
I am very, very blessed. I have a very, very unique background and upbringing. My mom comes to America 2 or 3, probably a few weeks before I'm born. My father's in the service. He meets my mom in Japan. Due to regulations, they have to be married twice. He told me he had 2 chances to bail, and he did. They had to have one wedding at the U.S. Embassy and a second wedding at the Japanese consulate. So they come to America. They stop off at a naval hospital in Massachusetts, where I was born. And then probably within months, they're moving to Western North Carolina, small community called Lake Toxway. Beautiful area. They move in with my American grandparents, known to me as Nana and Papa. So here you have a Japanese woman who barely speaks English, is a Buddhist, coming to America in rural North Carolina. We're the only non-white people for miles around. She converts over to Christianity, thanks to a local church. She then still struggles with some issues because my dad is a big marksman and outdoorsman, hunter. My mom doesn't believe in killing anything. So there was that conflict. But they move into my Nana and Papa's house. Now, my Nana and Papa are the most wonderful human beings on the planet. They were like God had gifted me with the playbook for the perfect marriage. But my Papa was a man of Ukrainian descent, a 20-year veteran of the military, had scars on his body from bullets fired by the Japanese. His walls adorn medals from his fight with the Japanese. He was an engineer, so he went back to Hiroshima and helped with the rebuild. He could speak the language. He knew the culture better than probably any non-Japanese person I've ever met. But if you can imagine how hard that is on my mom, I mean, she can barely speak English. Her and my dad are still together, amazing. Two tough people, I'll tell you. But still, it was very hard on her. She wanted to go back to Japan and take me. But my Nana is the matriarch of the family, and she is a Southern woman, part Cherokee Indian European ancestry. And like any Southern woman, they hug and cuddle. I've never seen my mom and dad hold hands. So as soon as she sees me, she takes me from my mom, caresses me. I'm her little Dougie. What's my mom to do? She's like, this is not how we raise children in Japan. So my mom, of course, she had her struggles. I remember people shout stuff at us across the street. Somebody slid a car tire. I remember once sitting in a restaurant. They wouldn't wait on us. So my dad made the comment to the owner that our money was just as green as anyone. And that he had a very big extended family, and none of them would ever return to that restaurant again since they wouldn't wait on us. I'm the first non-white kid in an all-white school where the principal actually asked my parents to remove me because he didn't think he could keep me safe. Of course, Nana steps in. Being a mountain woman, she has connections. Some really, really not so nice people. So I have a cousin, did time in prison, had to re-enroll in school, and he would gut anyone who threatened. Yeah, the little school I went to, you got to remember, we took rifles to school. You just leave them at the office and go squirrel hunting after school. That was common. Everybody carried their old lock blades. You remember the lock blade pocket knives with brass ends? You know, I'm being bullied at school. Here comes this kid, dirty t-shirt, rebel flag baseball cap. He reaches in his pocket. You could see the brass end of that pocket knife coming out. And he says, y'all mess with this boy, I'll cut you. And he shoved that pocket knife back in his pocket. Kids with the spurs. So I had a very unique upbringing, but I'm very thankful and very blessed. My parents are still together. Unfortunately, my grandparents have passed away. But I got to see a lot growing up. And the truth of it is, all of us have hardship in life. Mine just happened to be because of the color of my skin and the slant in my eyes. You know, I don't fault anyone. Girl looked at me on the school bus, told me that I was the N-word because I wasn't white. That girl's probably friends with me on Facebook. I don't even remember who she is. Teacher once grabbed me by the head of my hair. I don't even remember what teacher that was. But they just didn't know. You got to remember, this is the early 70s, mid 70s to late 70s when I went in school. You know, Vietnam's still fresh on people's mind. I look like a gook. Jap, Chen, gook. You look like the person who shot my uncle in Vietnam. I'm like, really? I'm Japanese. No. But they didn't care. But I'll be honest with you, 99.5% of the people in my community loved and endorsed my mom. There was always people looking out for me. There was a very small percentage of people who would shout things, say things. Some teachers, some students. They just didn't know. They just didn't understand. They had never seen someone like that. They had never seen someone like my mom. We were outsiders, foreigners. We weren't welcome to that. But like I said, for every person that was me, there was 100 people that were kind and supportive. So I look back on my childhood, I'm blessed. I'm thankful.
Yeah. I like what you're saying, Doug, too, because it just reminds me so much of, you know, when we get to know people, our prejudice is reduced.
Yes.
And when we don't, it's like not exposure. It's amazing. Sometimes in this country, some areas have the most prejudice and racism than any other place. And there's nobody other than white people.
Yeah.
So they don't get exposed to folks. And so when do they find out about other people? The media, the TV, I almost said Jersey Shore, but that's another story. But for the most part, they get their images from not real life.
No.
But you were saying that, look, I was the only one, and look at how many people. I love the guy that came out with the knife.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's such a testimony to what this country can be about if we allow ourselves to get to know each other and understand that, yeah, we might have different perspectives, different values even, different upbringings. But at the same time, that's wonderful. And I like what you said about it not being a melting pot. Love that. You know, it's more like a stew or a salad bowl or something, but not a melting pot.
And you can use a fork or you can use chopsticks.
You know, one of the things, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience unless people have some more stuff. But I like this thing of people, a lot of us have heard things we call microaggressions. A lot of us understand racism when we hear about it. But something like microaggression is a little bit different than, say, racism. But a microaggression is something that I did. I spent maybe 30 years doing diversity, including training. I've been literally all over this world. I had a chance to go to Japan and spend some time speaking in Japan for a couple of months. But one of the things I did that really makes, to this day, I think about it. You love this, that there was someone in my class who was from Philippines. And I went to him and I said, "Where are you from?" He says, "Brooklyn." Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I said, no, where are you from?
Oh, yeah.
You see that? You see the microaggression? And he says, "Dan, I'm from Brooklyn. We played your high school in basketball because I grew up in New York City." And so so that's the kind of thing, if you see someone that looks foreign, then they've got to be born elsewhere. It's like, weren't you born in Japan? No, I was born in
You
some.
can tell by my southern accent.
Yeah.
Out of country as most of y'all.
Yeah. But isn't that amazing? And here I am, I'm doing diversity training now. I'm helping people to become aware of all the diversity stuff. And I asked this dude, "Where you from?" Now for him, it wasn't just Dan doing it, but he gets that over and over and over and over again. "Where are you from?" And he's trying to say to the dudes, you know, I like the New York Knicks. You know, I played basketball with half you guys, and yet you still ask me a question like that. And so that's the kind of, you know, it's the microaggression. Like, for example, "Aren't you good in math?" Be another one that they always get. And it's kind of like, and particularly for Asian women, it's like you're submissive to your husband and you run the household and you got you take care of all the money and you just tell the men what to do and they do it.
Okay.
You know?
Sally knows my wife.
Yeah.
Definitely not one of those.
So, any other questions
Yeah.
about, I mean, we talk about stereotype, but anything to add to say microaggressions?
I think this microaggression, when you say where you're from, yeah, that's, it really depends on, what your mindset is. When people ask me where I'm from, I say New Jersey. And I don't give a second thought about, China or anything else. I've been here longer than at any place. Okay, so see, you need to also think about why the person asks you, because they don't know you, okay? You look different. They're trying to engage you. That's the other way to look at it. So try not to sort of put them and say, oh, geez, you're trying to school me again. No, I wouldn't start that way at all. Because, if you go that way, there's only one way to end up, a winner and a loser. Okay, you're gonna wind up with an argument. So that's how I would approach that.
I don't think, I agree completely with what he's saying, because I'll give you a couple examples. A lot of times in the store, I'll have people, where are you from? And especially people from South America. I have customers who are from South America. They run cleaning businesses. People from Brazil, they recognize Japanese ancestry because there's a lot of Japanese in Brazil. Colombia has a lot of Chinese. One of my customers is Chinese Colombian. And she keeps staring, she goes, I want to ask you something. I said, go ahead, ask. What's your nationality?
Yeah.
Because she was just curious. And it doesn't hurt my feelings. I had a gentleman in our Boone location, and it was right before the pandemic. He kept staring at me as I was talking. And his wife's white and he's black, and they're work outside. You can tell by their clothing. He had panicked and broken his belt. And I was explaining to him how to put it on. Looks at his wife, looks at me, and he leans over the counter and goes, where are you from? His wife turned red, blood red as that fire alarm, and hits him. I said, ma'am, it's okay. He's just curious. She goes, you can't offend people like that. I said, it's not offensive. Now I'm explaining to him. He goes, well, I'm what they call black country. She's white country. Your country. I don't know what kind. And he didn't mean it offensively. He had just never seen an Asian dude with a Southern accent. He was black with a Southern accent. She was white with a Southern accent. And it doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I don't look at it as all offensively. I mean, think about it. I had a phone call during the COVID pandemic. The guy says, man, I don't know how to really ask this, but my neighbor said if I had a vacuum problem to call you and ask for the Asian guy with a Southern accent. That's me. I mean, nobody in this room will walk out of here and forget who I am. You may forget my name, but you'll remember that vacuum dude. That's Asian. He talks Southern. I love it. I love the uniqueness that it brings to the table. So when people ask me, where are you from? I love it. I'll tell you all about it. I've locked the door.
And that's the way you gotta,
Yeah.
that's the way you gotta take it, right?
Yeah.
It's only microaggression if you take it to mean they're being aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying, put it out there. That's just a way to get to know somebody. People ask me, you're Indian. I said, no, I'm Fijian.
Yeah.
Because I am.
Virginia.
I'm a Pacific Islander, baby.
Yeah.
You know, my kids put that in their college application. Their father and their grandfather was born in Fiji. So you can't. And kind of going back, I think that's one of the flaws that we have sometimes. You talk about the media. We as a nation like to sensationalize things at the end of the day, right? And we'll silo it, we'll give it terminology, we'll do this. You just take a look at it, like you said, they're just trying to get to know me. They're just trying to get to know me. Here's a chance to get to know me. You know, and you know, that's sort of, I think we're getting there slowly.
And I love that curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that's the hallmark of learning and growing and all of that. And not be afraid, if I have a question in my mind, not be afraid to ask because I'm afraid I might offend you. When in fact, some people like, hey, get to know me. Ask me a question. I'm okay. I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
'Cause I
not
have
every
confidence, yeah.
blue-eyed person is from the same place.
You got it, yeah, you
Okay.
got it. Yeah,
And
you got it, yeah.
Everybody's got a story.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. I got a lot of stories, like, I could tell you about, you talk about southern accent,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was one of my first introductions to Goldsboro, North Carolina. I walked into, it used to be, Bill, you probably won't know this, you're too young, but it used to be 5 and 10 stores, 5, 10 stores, remember those?
Mhm.
I walked in there one time to buy something, and it was a woman that looked Asian American. And I asked her for something, and she came up with the Southern drawl. And I was like, I wanted to say, where you from?
Yeah.
But I had enough sense to just say, okay, thank you, I'll go get it. But this, let's open it up, if you guys don't mind. Any questions, comments? But if you would do me a favor, though, if you have a comment or a question, kind of keep it short, because I got a feeling a couple of people might want to say something in here. So if you have a question or something that you don't really understand about anything we said, please feel free. This is a good time to get something in. Anybody have a question? Please.
I have a comment. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a very good and interesting conversation. And one of the things that you said really struck me because when you talked about people needing to get to know each other and having relationships with folks. I am part of a group here in North Mecklenburg called Unity in Community. And that's the very premise on which we were founded. It was after Charlottesville, and there was a vigil on the Davidson Green. And one of the organizers, an associate pastor from Mount Zion United Baptist Church, put out a statistic that 75% of white people don't have a single Black friend, and 65% of Black people don't have a single white friend. And that's when he put out kind of a challenge to people. If you want to see things change, if we want to see things change in this country, we have to know each other. We have to talk to each other. We have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. We have to be curious and not hateful against each other. And so I just wanted to say thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And I'll be around if anyone is interested in talking after the meeting. My name is Pam Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
And I think it's go ahead, but I want to say, basically what you've asked the group is essentially, or you gave a comment and you appreciate the fact that they say you get to know folks. But I love that statistics you gave, that 75% white folks don't have a Black friend, and 65% of Black folks don't have a white friend. And this is a country that's really multi-ethnic country, and that statistics sometimes frightens me. It saddens me. But go ahead.
That statistic, I'm not saying it's not real. It did not take into account athletes. And
Take into
I'm a big proponent of wrestling. Anybody in here has been a wrestler?
Athletes.
athletes, yeah.
If we get kids in team sports or in individual sports, and like I said, I love wrestling, and so my pick would always be wrestling or boxing. There's no team out there that's one color. You are forced at a young age to have teammates. I mean, if it's wrestling, you're grabbing a hold of somebody that's a different color than you when you're rolling around on the mat. You get to know people at their core. I promise you, when you are so exhausted, you cannot physically get up, and the guy's laying on top of you, the real you is going to come out. These video games and stuff, these online games, and it's great, but it's keeping people away. It's keeping a wall up between us all. And I don't see you. I don't know who you are, but we're playing on the game together. Whereas in a sport, we can fix that 75 and 65 because it forces kids to engage at a raw level. I mean, take basketball. everybody wants to win. There's emotions flying, things are being said, but you see how people act when they're under pressure. The real them comes out. There's no fake facades. So my little itty bitty 2 cents worth of the solution is keep kids in sports. Once again, if they're playing a sport, they will always have friends of another color.
Other questions? Please, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Lisa Jewell. I'm a candidate for House District 98. Wanted to thank you for being here today. And I have a two-part question. What are the current demographic trends for Asian Americans in the Lake Norman area and in Charlotte? And the second part of the question is, are there services or programming that the Asian community needs from local government?
Thank you. Okay, so one is a demographic question, what-
Right.
particularly Asian Americans, or
Yes.
because you got Asians, Asian Americans, and you got
All.
Pacific Islanders. So
Both.
all of them. Okay, so that would be one question. Other one is the needs question,
Yes.
which is a real good question. So anybody want to tackle it? John?
Let me take a crack at answering your first question. I'll give you some idea. You can Google all those, okay? I'll just make it easier for you. In the Mecklenburg County area, 60,000. Now, there's also another statistics called CSA, Consolidated Statistical Area. That's from the Office Management and Budget. And that number includes the connected metro area. Because Charlotte's on the border with South Carolina, so you're gonna have an overflow in there. That's not in the North Carolina statistics. So there you're looking at the CSA data show that over 130,000 Asians in the area. And in terms of, the percentage, I think it's still the top 6, still close to the top 6. And then you got a bunch from Southeast Asia. You're talking about outside of Vietnam and Cambodia, Laos, Hmongs, Montagnards, Burmese, Bhutanese, Nepali, and then Bangladesh and Pakistan. I think they are probably more sizable. Okay, so you have that group. In terms of what they need from the local government, just like any other minority. Okay, the challenge is that because in part those are smaller communities, the language, the cultural barrier, make it a little bit hard to actually access the community, the health, the social service. And we have a fellow Asian Chamber Board member named Schwab. He was very, very active in terms of training, they call navigators. Okay, just basically to take them by the hand to help them to connect with the local social services.
I think recognition is big, right? I mean, it took time, John, based on what you guys have been doing forever. Local governments now realize and understand what a critical part of the, not just community, the economy, this demographic is. And then it's upon people to continuously voice that, right? You've got folks that are voicing it for all the different communities, just to be heard, understood, and recognized. You do that. My uncle did that for a very long time, and passed it on to me to do that too. It's just, making sure that your electeds are aware of what you bring to the table, and you're not forgotten at the end of the day. And that's all you can ask for. You can't ask for special treatment at the end. You want to ask for fairness across the board.
We're really looking for connecting the opportunity and being able to communicate to them. We never ask for, okay, we need to be treated specially. We don't. Okay, but the problem we have is that we don't ask. Okay, you don't ask, you never get. Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You gotta ask. It's how he knows I'm not shy.
I'm the money, so I call you.
And you have to, right? I mean, I think my uncle told me this right off the bat. He goes, you can't just be a business partner of a community. You got to be an involved civic partner as well. And if you don't vote, you don't speak, you might as well just shut up. because you don't have a right to say anything. If you're not gonna voice an opinion, then don't come back and complain afterwards. That's the motto most people should live by. Is, if you're not an engaged member, then sorry.
And I think also that, particularly with public officials, that one of the things is just understanding that sometimes they play a role in combating misinformation. And I think that one of the things, like for example, and I'll say this, and I'm not trying to be political here, but this whole thing we went through the pandemic, do you know what that caused Asian Americans? Because once some politicians were saying that that it came from China, it was the China flu, and that was misinformation. But not very many politicians came out and said, "Look, that's not true. We're not going to let that go in our community." And the smaller the community, it could be. We had a candidate for mayor here from Huntersville, but in his small community, he could say something about that. In your district too, it's just the kind of pushback I think is really important right now, because it's a voice that people listen to, and when they don't say anything, then that misinformation continues to flourish, I think. So I think that's a real need in these times. I'm hoping we won't hear a lot of that during this election cycle. I'm hopeful, very hopeful that we won't. So, yeah.
And one of the things that I say, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see this in the Indian American community when it comes to electives, right? I mean, I spoke to the Asian American Hotel Owners Convention a couple of years ago, and my point is, we flock to our leaders when we want and need something, not before that. At the end of the day, you need to create relationships when you're not in need. During COVID, everybody needed them. They're listening to 10 million different people at one time. Now, if you had a relationship built ahead of time, you got the front of the line, right? At the end of the day, our industry got to the front of the line because we had built relationships. We got $500 million put into a budget specifically for hotels and restaurants out of the ARPA money that came. And that's just because we built relationships ahead of time. And it's, that's just, it's a slogan for anything, right? Building relationships across the board, not just when I need something. We're gonna have a relationship when I don't need you.
And one of the things the chamber can help with that, Bill Russell is on speed dial with most of the politicians in this country. They all owe him something. So he's got a voice.
It's always good to have that.
Yeah.
I think also, the point you make also is that there's a huge difference between communication, relationship versus lobbying.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a big distinction in there. So it's really, you gotta put your hand on your heart, do I buy this, or this is basically our relationship? I think that's kind of important. And not that it works all the time, but you need to remind yourself that, this is a good relationship, or this is a little bit tilted, for shaded reasons.
The conversation is great, but it's, what I'm gonna say is I think from a diversity training point of view, we look for allies, right? I think allyship is what's being highlighted here, where that nurturing of that relationship is very, very important. I want to talk a little bit about the microaggression, because there is an opportunity for here to talk about bias. I think everybody in the room, once a child is born, they get through bias. They already have bias in them. That could be either through parent, environment, social media, I'll put that in there, or what they read and where they go to as well. But as for officials who are running for seats in the political arena, education is very, very important. I have a first grade. She goes to Mountain Creek STEM Academy. Yep, you can say that. I am Asian. I put her in the STEM Academy. We're loud and proud of that. But I want her to understand she is going to stand out in that classroom. And I want her to understand what tools she needs in order to be tough and have those meaningful conversations. Bus rides, is not fun for anybody, but that's when you get to see, oh, you look different, or what are you eating? That smells funny. Do you want to try? Those are some things I'm trying to tell her, but I think the greater conversation here is
how do we bring that education about these factors into the classroom? Not only when a person reaches their college or high school level, but starting right from elementary. And I know people will beg to differ from me that that doesn't need to happen at such a young age, but as a person who lives within and came to this country in 2003 to get their higher education, and then became citizen 2 years ago in the wonderful city of Charlotte, I have seen that firsthand. Thank you to my mom and dad.
Yeah.
But I see that firsthand where I'm at a workplace. I'm in a very pivotal place in my career where I do see passed up on that opportunity, passed up on that career growth. And I do tend to think, is it because of certain things that I am?
Yeah.
I think everybody knows what I'm referring to here. But how do I still move forward and create that community of conversation and telling my daughter, we're gonna have some challenges.
Yeah.
This is what you're gonna do to move forward. And she's the first grader looking at me, Mom, what the heck are you talking about? I just want to go outside and play. But
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Juan, for having this forum. Thank you for asking your question. I think education is very important. Anything that you could do to bring the education in the classrooms, right at the first.
Yeah.
And you know what,
level.
Let me just, we want to paraphrase.
I was just gonna
what you're
just
saying.
what you're saying, right? Some of it comes back on us,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
let
I
me just tell the audience, the Zoom folks, that basically what you're talking about is how do we educate? Should we educate against biases? Should we start at the level of, say, elementary school doing that?
and that's what I'm saying. I think we
Yes,
should,
sir.
right? I mean, my wife does it.
Yeah.
She'll go to schools and she'll talk
Yeah.
about Hinduism. She'll talk about our culture.
Yeah.
You know, we just did a project. I helped fund it, the art project at West Mecklenburg High School.
Yeah.
And it was a group of, it's called Namaste Artists. I did it. She's not watching this, so anonymously I paid for it. And then her group went and did the painting, and it was, Asian American artists, students, teachers, all collaborated and did a mural all along the thing. But we have to do more of it, right? As a parent, I would volunteer to the class and say, and we're gonna talk about, we'll do a cultural exchange. And they're hungry for it. The schools are hungry because they don't have the capability to do it themselves. So how do we go as a different ethnic community and participate in things like that? So I would, I mean, asking CMS to do it is good. But we have to start, so,
We have to find that
yeah.
allyship where we can start having those
yeah,
courageous.
at least acknowledgement is there, right? Yeah. Yep.
Hey, what can we do? This is a growing population, because if that population's needs are not met, we're gonna find it somewhere else.
I live in South
This
Mac.
work and everything.
It's crazy.
I'm in Huntersville.
Yeah,
Tell me
it's the
about
same thing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
let's do that.
It's amazing.
I mean, when you say elementary, I'm thinking even like kindergarten age, I mean, because curiosity,
Correct.
and their little brains are growing, and, by the time you're in high school, there's so much of
Minds
still
are
set their heads. Yeah, I really think the younger you get to the children. the
That's
better.
good, yeah,
And
good.
it shouldn't be a one event thing. It
Yeah.
needs to be
Correct.
continual
Yeah.
throughout
Yes.
their schooling. Because what a 6-year-old and what a 13-year-old are capable of understanding is very different.
Yeah, good point. Well, we
Can I
have,
tell you exactly what my mom did?
Yeah.
Now, once again, remember, my mom speaks virtually no English. And riding the school bus, I was beaten up pretty bad a few times. Of course, once again, but there was always people who took up for me. So Miss Dillard's second grade class, my mom breaks out her kimono, all Japanese attire, sets a meeting up with the school, and she's taught my second grade class about Japanese culture and barely speaking English. So you can imagine how hard that was for her. I mean, I can speak perfectly good English, and I do not like being in front of a camera and in front of a bunch of people talking. So imagine not being able to speak good English. But she did that. It was such a big to-do. Because I'm the first one, my kid. Did the Transylvania Times, the local newspaper, set a reporter out there and did a 3/4 page news article about it. Do something like that. Show up, set a time when you can show up at the school. Teach them about your culture, where you came from. And show them how mom tried to teach the children how to use chopsticks. And let them embrace your culture. And did it help? Yes, I think it did help. Like I said, I really had a tough time when I was young. And I'm sure my mom was scared to death to go to the school. But it really, it kind of made me the cool kid for a little while. And once again, there were more allies, so to speak, teachers who took up for me. There's teachers who hated me, but there's teachers who took up for me. Older students started taking up for me. There was more allies because my mom did that. And like I said, I know it's not easy, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, I like those two words, ally and courage. We have like literally 45 seconds left. Can I get each of the panelists to say a final word as we close down? As much as I hate to, I wish I could stay up here all day. But would you have any final words?
Yeah, I thank you for having me. Like I said, I mean, we're all in this together, and that's what we have to remember at the end of the day. And as I said, right, it's upon, I take it on myself, and I think people should kind of take personal responsibility. I mean, if you want to get to know me, I have to put myself out there at the end of the day. So that's the motto I live by on a daily basis, and it's worked so far.
Courage. Doug?
I want to thank everybody for hosting this event. Thank you, Bill Russell, and the Lake Norman Chamber. It's hard to follow what you said, but basically, same thing. If you're someone like myself who's unique, don't be afraid to be unique. Don't let it hurt your feelings when somebody asks where you're from. Embrace it. It's an opportunity for you to show your uniqueness as a gift. Once again, I'm an Asian dude with a Southern accent, so back. Nobody forgets who you are when you're different. Don't be afraid to embrace what makes you different and to be willing to show it to everyone.
John.
Well, thank you so much for inviting. I think this is a great session, Bill, and the panel. Thank you to all of you. And the difference between the conversation, the content of conversation today versus 16 years ago, when we had our first Dragon Ball event, a press, I think David Yerman, I think Lake Norman magazine, I think, he came to talk to me. He said, "Why do you have the Dragon Ball here?" Before I answered, he said, "I know why, because we have a lot of big tree here. You can duck the tree and make a canoe, so you can make a Dragon Ball." So there's a huge difference there. And I think connect and communicate and find more common ground. And I hate to make the pitch to you. Please visit the Asian community exhibit at the Charlotte Museum of History. You can see that, that this is not 20, 30 years. You're talking about centuries of connections and some hardships, some tribulations, some triumph. Okay, hopefully we're all moving in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Fifth Third Bank, for sponsoring our luncheon today. And hopefully, if you have some more information to say about the Diversity Council, we're actually having an orientation meeting on Thursday at 1 o'clock in this office. I'm sorry, in this what is conference room. And so feel free to just stop by and get some information about what the Diversity Council is and what we do. And this is one of the things that we do, and I love it. Again, thanks again, Bill, for organizing this, and Laura, can't help but thank you and for all that you've done for this. So have a good day the rest of the week, and be curious, be open-minded, have that growth mindset.
So we'll see you soon.
Okay.